I'd like to bring a meeting of April 6th to order, asking if anybody beside LCAT would be recording this meeting.
Shirley Tamcrati for the minutes.
Thank you. At this point, we'd like to review and approve the minutes of the meeting of March 18th.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And this will be setting sewer and water rates at this hearing. And at this point, we'll turn it over to you.
Certainly. I'll note for the record that we did publish a notification of a public hearing to discuss water and sewer rates, I believe in the Springfield Republican a couple of weeks ago. We did obviously post it on the town's posting, both in electronic form as well as in print form. So I believe we've complied with the required public notification requirements. I'm going to spend some time, it'll be most of my time talking today will be about water and sewer rates as well as fees that the Board of Public Works may choose to adopt tonight. Working through the package that I put together, if you'd like to look at the first page. One thing I did that was a little bit different this year is I took a look at what we typically do, our historical water and sewer rates. And as we're building this up over the past 19 years. And I thought it was probably helpful to take a look at what those rates would be adjusted for inflation. So you can see that I added two columns for the water rate and the sewer rate. I basically assumed an inflation rate of 3% per year and carried those water and sewer rates back 19 years and took a look at what, the rate that the board had established in 1996, what that would be equivalent to today if inflation had increased that rate at 3% per year. And it was somewhat interesting to take a look at that. Over time, those rates, when adjusted for inflation, have been pretty steady. They've bounced up and down a little bit, but they come in pretty close to where we currently are with rates. I also took a look at, over those 19 years, adjusted what the minimum would be, over those 19 years, what the maximum would be, what the average was. Again, sort of as a couple of data points to compare anything that the board might decide to do this evening. The other thing we typically do is we take a look at how we compare to other communities. And you can see in blue and green, I believe, is the town of East Long Meadow's current water rate, which is $2.65 per 100 cubic feet. And the town of East Long Meadow sewer rate, which is $2.55 per 100 cubic feet. And that generally puts us pretty close to the bottom compared to many of our peers. The community that's very low, I'll note that the town of West Springfield, that they are still subsidizing their water and sewer rates through the general fund. And that's, I believe, is one of the main reasons why their rate is as low as it is. If you put them aside, we're pretty close to the bottom in terms of the lowest of any of the adjoining communities. I'll note, I just happened to see, I think it was in the newspaper yesterday, the city of Worcester is dealing with their upcoming water and sewer rates, for instance, and they're looking at a relatively modest increase in their water rate to $3.60 per 100 cubic feet. They're looking at a sewer rate, which has now gotten as high as $6.62 per 100 cubic feet.
That's in Worcester?
That's in Worcester.
Wow.
The city of Northampton is at $6.27 per 100 cubic feet.
And what's this mean, plus stormwater?
That's the
fee?
stormwater.
No, plus that.
Plus the stormwater
Oh,
fee.
plus that doesn't include
Correct.
it?
That's the sewer rate by itself.
Wow.
Ooh.
So, some of the communities that are having to make, some of the major multi-million dollar improvements in their infrastructure are having to pay for those, and as a result of that are pushing the rates up quite a bit.
Wow.
I will note another thing, and I know this firsthand in Northampton, is one of the things that the sewer rate does and the water rate does in Northampton is it does help to support other city departments. There are a significant number of interdepartment transfers that are covered by the water and sewer rates. I don't believe that they bill for water and sewer, so it's sort of a one-way transfer, and that helps to push their rates up as well. Whereas the board knows, and working with the Board of Public Works and Board of Selectmen, I think we all agreed that we really just wanted to cover the cost associated with the Water and Sewer Enterprise Fund and not attempt to collect revenue for other departments, but at the same time, not look to bill other departments for services that the water or sewer enterprise funds provide. And I would expect all of these numbers to go up. In fact, I just got off the phone a couple of minutes with the town manager in Long Meadow and asked him what he thought he was, where their trends were going, as an example. And he said that they typically deal with rates in August, but he would be expecting a rate increase in Long Meadow this coming year. So, we may make a decision tonight that is a step ahead of some of the other communities, but I expect the other communities will be making similar decisions. The next page, page 3, is a pretty similar to what you've seen in the past. In fact, I don't think these numbers have changed at all. A couple of items I do want to just kind of talk about big picture. With this being our first year of enacting the enterprise fund, and we're moving monies into the enterprise fund, and we're starting to figure out what our retained earnings look like, or the need to use retained earnings look like on a year-by-year basis. I expect we'll get a clearer picture of things over the next year or two. There are some trends that I suspect we'll be looking at in the future, but until, we get a year or two into this, I guess I wouldn't be getting too nervous by what some of those trends might be telling us right now. So page 3 is for the Water Enterprise Fund, and what that is really our fiscal 16 budget, which has been submitted and at this point approved by appropriations. It still needs to be approved by town meeting, but it, at this point, appears to be the budget that we're going to be working with in fiscal 16. That then translates to a total expense to carry our operating costs, to carry our capital costs, to carry our reserve fund for vehicles, which is a new fund that we're going to be setting up, carry the principal and interest that we're paying for previous projects. That then works into the next page, which again is a sheet that's very similar to what you've seen in the past, where you basically take a look at what are your current retained earnings, what are your expenses, what do you estimate your revenue to be, and what do you need for rates in order to achieve whatever goal you're trying to achieve. In this case, what I've presented is a scenario that has us continuing to use retained earnings to some extent, but I do think it's probably the last year where we're going to be able to use retained earnings to help dampen the impact on the rate. There are, like any projection, a number of uncertainties. There's the basic uncertainty is we don't have any idea until we get through the end of the year how much water our customers are going to consume. So our revenues are variable. Some years as much as 10 or 20% year by year. And the assumptions I've made here are fairly conservative assumptions. Sort of like about the bottom third in terms of, it's not the lowest possible year we've seen, but it's, I believe, the second or third lowest in the past 10 or 15 years in terms of an assumption. The other uncertainty right now there, particularly in the future, is what Springfield Water and Sewer is really going to have for capital improvement costs. They scared us a little bit last year with some pretty high estimates of what the cost might be going out over the next 5 years. The first year into the 5-year capital improvement plan, those costs have not been what they had estimated to be, partly because they saw some of their construction costs being quite a bit less than they had estimated. Partly that they deferred some of the financing, they came up with different financing strategies. And I suspect partly that, they probably have heard from communities that, what they're looking to do might have been a little bit too aggressive. So I've been asking for updated projections to see what the next 3 to 5 years might look like. I haven't received those yet, and until I receive those, I think there's some uncertainty of what Springfield Water and Sewer Commission's real costs are going to be going forward. And then again, it's only a projection. And the last item I did want to note was when I developed this originally, I didn't take a look at bonding scenarios because there's a whole multitude of different scenarios that you could have. And most importantly, for instance, next year where we're anticipating a $500,000 capital improvement project, right now what I've presented shows us carrying a 100% of that capital burden in year one. That's not very realistic. Most likely, we would finance that over 5 years, 10 years. And if we did that, that would significantly reduce the impact on our reserve fund, and would also likely give us an opportunity to minimize the impact on rates as well, or to reduce the impact on rates. So there's a lot of things as we get closer to next year, we'll start thinking about next year and what's the appropriate strategy at that time. Based on this year's scenario, I'm at this point looking at an increase up to $2.95 per 100 cubic feet. And it is a significant increase. It's a 30-cent per unit increase. But believe that that is what's necessary based on the retained earnings we currently have and a goal of still maintaining some retained earnings to get through the year with an adequate amount of reserve in the bank and pay our expenses.
Okay.
Question, as I said before, my biggest concern is replacement of vehicles, because we have to replace the vehicles. And I talked to you earlier,
Right.
but, we were talking about putting in $35,000 a year and, 35 from water, 35 from sewer. If we have to buy a backhoe or a dump truck, we're talking close to $200,000.
Right.
And, we could, are we on the capital budget for this year going to town meeting, do we have anything that's gonna come out of for replacement vehicles?
We don't this year. Right
Okay.
now, the
Right.
highest ranked vehicles we have are vehicles 77 and 78, which I believe are both F-350s.
That's correct.
That we're optimistic that they'll be presented to town meeting for funding this year. We do not have any of the equipment or any of the vehicles that have been allocated to water and sewer. So
So nothing, we're not, for 2016, we're not looking at purchasing anything unless it gets put through through capital.
that's correct.
Okay.
In the way that this would work, as we've talked about, is that right up front, and you'll see in a moment in terms of the enterprise article that we would present to the voters at town meeting, show a vehicle replacement fund. It's there, it's funded every year with the intent of building up and to come up with that $35,000 number or $70,000 per year, effectively between water and sewer, as I valued the current fleet that we've allocated to water and sewer, which is 21% of the vehicles that the department is responsible for. That value is a little bit over $700,000. And for a starting point, I said, well, if we had to replace the entire fleet in 10 years, we need to build up the equivalent money in the bank to be able to replace those vehicles. If we had to replace a dump truck in year 2, we wouldn't have those monies in the bank to be able to replace it in year 2, but we would have financing strategies. We could borrow money over 5 years to spread the cost of that out, knowing that we're collecting the revenue that's built into the budget to support the repayment of that loan. The next sheet I put together, sheet number 5, is an updated version of what you saw a month or so ago. This is what will be presented to town meeting for action by the voters, which is essentially a balance sheet for the Water Enterprise Fund. It lists the the expenses that the fund will incur. It lists the revenue that the fund is intended to bring in. And it shows if it's a year where the revenue is greater than the expenses, it would show a budget surplus. If it's a year where the revenue was not adequate to keep up with the expenses, it would show a retained earnings. And it will never balance out perfectly year by year. You'll have some years where you might be dipping into the bank because, again, you've got some capital improvements that year that are greater than the average capital improvements. And other years you're going to be putting funds back into the bank that you rely upon in following years to get things done. One thing that I've done that is a little bit different than what you've seen before is I did break the debt service out between principal and interest, and that was at the request of the town accountant. So you can see those two different numbers. And that I also did show as a separate line item to put it right out there for the voters so they understand it, that within the expenses that the department is going to incur, it'll be the vehicle replacement reserve account. That will be basically funding for when it's necessary for capital purchases.
So, we're gonna plug in a number at the top there. I move that, and we put a dollar, is that what it's going in there, a dollar figure?
The appropriation is actually this entire, it's a set.
So you're gonna ask that, I move that 2,577,139 be appropriated from the Water Enterprise Fund and raised as follows?
Right,
Okay.
that's correct. There's a chance that the town accountant will continue to massage this a little bit, because what, she and I have talked quite a bit, and she's seen this. She is working her way through the overall budget right now, and is going to circle back to this article itself, so she may tweak it just a little bit. The other thing I'm not certain about yet is who will actually move the article on the floor. You know, for general townwide funding, typically it would be, I believe, the finance, but the appropriations committee most likely, or Board of Selectmen. Obviously, I don't think it would be Board of Selectmen here, but might it be the appropriations, or would it be the Board of
I
Public
would say
Works?
support Public Works. It's our department,
You're
and,
right. I think so.
you know, we've been working in conjunction with the Board of Selectmen, but it's our
Right.
department now, and this whole thing is our budget.
Right. And as people know, this, like any other town meeting article, if this was to change during the year, and if something came up on an emergency basis and we needed to dip into the reserve account, we would have to go back to the voters and would have to go to a special town meeting for that purpose. So it's not, you know, we have control within what is presented on this sheet, but to go outside of what's on this sheet then would require additional
That
town
would
meeting
cause
action.
Would we
Special
be
town
able to, like, if we run into emergency, go to appropriations and ask for a transfer in from our reserve and then go to town meeting later? Is that?
I expect, like they do with town-wide issues, that, you know, we've gotten to appropriations and we requested an emergency transfer to deal with. I expect that they will develop a similar process. Typically, it's not an unlimited amount. They have, you know, have thoughts in mind in terms of, you know, what they're comfortable doing, because eventually you have to catch up. Eventually, you have to go to town meeting and approve that transfer retroactively. So I expect we'll work that over the first year. So that's the Water Enterprise Fund. Sewer Enterprise Fund, very similar. I'll note that this sheet that you see, page number 6, is updated from what you had seen previously. We and all the other communities that participate or are served by the Springfield Water and Sewer Commission met with the commission on the 30th of March, and at that point they presented to us their 5-year capital improvement plan going forward. And the good news there is that we're pretty flat in terms of cost through fiscal 17 based on their current projections. They do at this point predict that we'll see some increases starting in fiscal 18, but nowhere near the magnitude of the increases that they're predicting to occur on the drinking water side of the business. So I've taken their most recent projections, which are subject to change, and placed them in this projection of a 5-year plan. When we look at that similar situation,
Why does it 18 go up and then goes back down again?
that's strictly based on their projections. You know, they really haven't figured out financing strategies or anything else yet. It's strictly, here are the numbers we expect to spend year by year, and once they take a look at bonding possibilities and whether they get, you know, low interest loans to the state or other types of things to make some of these projects happen, then I expect they'll probably, you know, flatten these increases, or at least they'll
Yeah, it's up, it's down,
yeah,
it's up, it's
right,
down.
right.
Yeah.
And I think, as I, you know, said in the drinking water side, I think we've seen already in the first year that what they predicted would happen isn't going to have to happen. So I think once they get real with the numbers, you know, then they massage them. And hopefully their projections are conservative and things are better than. But again, as I said, the good news is I think we're in good shape through, you know, through 16, through 17, and possibly at 18 we're looking at an impact.
That takes another pretty good jump in 20.
It does, again, you know,
But
it's,
that's kind of
a lot
far
can
out
happen in
there.
5 years,
Yeah.
yeah. And for what it's worth, the primary thing that they're looking at is they are having to replace, you may or may not be familiar, there's a major pumping station, the Indian Orchard Pumping Station, which actually benefits Ludlow primarily, and then the main line that goes from there all the way to Bondi's Island across
Right.
the river. They're experiencing some significant corrosion problems in that line. It's the main line that comes into the plant that they're looking at having to replace, not the whole thing, but some sections of that. And given that all the flow goes through that pipeline, the cost of bypassing flow and doing things so you can do what you need to do gets very expensive. So that's really the major project they're looking at. They're not looking at any major projects at the treatment plant. It's primarily on
That's more out towards the orchard?
it starts at the orchard, but they're definitely looking at replacing the line that goes under the Connecticut River, for instance.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah, so there's some real dollars there. That was a $30 or $40 million project or something like that, if I recall.
Don't drain the river.
Correct.
Do they sleeve it?
I'm not certain what they did the last time. Typically on something that, well, years ago, you typically would have open cutted that. You might have put in coffer dams and you would have worked your way across the river, putting in coffer dams and dewatering behind the coffer dam. I suspect for a pipe that large, and I just got to believe it's probably 4, 5, 6 feet or bigger, I think you probably still do that. I don't think any of the, unless, well, you know, the technology is out there to do what they call micro-tunneling, for instance, where you get a tunneling apparatus, basically, and you tunnel, you know, straight through. That might be an option with current technology. Directional drilling and some of the other technology that's out there won't go to anything that large, but,
Right.
you know, a true tunnel boring machine, you know, would allow you to get through something like that, and might that be technology they consider, perhaps? Yeah. So the, sort of the same analysis, taking a look at 16, taking a look, you know, with an eye towards what might happen in the future. The other thing that gets trued up every year is actually what our true retained earnings are, and I had some discussions, and Sarah and I, the town accountant, went back and forth a couple of times today, and right now, you know, the good thing is her estimates of retained earnings this year are actually greater than my estimate. You know, we'll see how it all plays out. There's still, from her analysis, there's still 4 months of the year left, because revenue gets posted at the end of the month. So,
Right.
you know, so her numbers are a month behind. We'll see. You know, see
Right.
what the actual revenue are. And the good news is, if my estimates are conservative and we achieve more revenue, that revenue goes into the retained earnings, and that allows us in the future to then, you know, take a look at you know, potentially minimizing rate impacts. So, based on my analysis at this point, in order to get through the year, still again dipping into retained earnings.
You feel comfortable that with the Springfield Water and Sewer Commission that for 3 years in a row, it's gonna be the same now, 650, 650, and 650?
It has, actually, it's been less than that. That's an area where one of the reasons our retained earnings have been more than estimated is that we have kept our budget flat, but our actual costs have been less than what we budgeted. And again, those savings go into the bank at that point to save for the future. So
Okay.
the trend
Good.
thus far has been positive.
Yeah.
And again, they're projecting until 18 that that trend is going to stay the same.
Good.
And INI's had something to do with keeping some of the purchases down too, right?
It definitely does, and by, you know, a lot of the total Springfield bill is a total bill. If we're able to reduce more II than our neighbors are, our piece of that pie gets smaller and theirs gets bigger. So yes, it's definitely beneficial.
Good.
So looking at our starting balance, looking at our expenses, looking at our revenues, looking at trying to finish the year with some money left in the bank, as well as funding the vehicle replacement fund. I'm looking right now at having to increase our rates. We did not increase rates at all last year. We kept rates flat at $2.55 per 100 cubic feet. But this year, having to increase them to $2.80 per 100 cubic feet. Again, putting it in historical perspective, if the the inflation analysis that I did at the very beginning means anything, it's kind of right in the middle of using inflation-adjusted numbers where we've been for 19 years. But certainly, it's gone up because the cost of everything has gone up over those 19 years. It does look like going forward that the sewer rate will be a lot more stable because, again, the magnitude of the improvements that they're talking about are not as significant as on the drinking water side. And also, we're starting to see some of our principal interest costs going down, so that helps to offset some of the cost increases. And then finally, a similar analysis on what gets presented to town meeting. Again, expenses, revenue. Analysis shows that in order to break even and pay our bills, we will need to dip into retained earnings to the tune of about $186,000 this year. Still maintaining enough retained earnings to be safe. So I can keep talking through the rest of the presentation. As always, we take a look at what does this mean to an average customer, and it's a real impact, and there's no denying that. On average, we're looking at about a $50 per year impact total between water and sewer. It's interesting though, if you take a look at what does that mean on a weekly basis, it's $1 a week. On a daily basis, it's 13 cents per day. On a monthly basis, it's $4 per month. So it's a real cost. But we take a look at what we spend money on a weekly basis. It's a very small piece compared to where we invest.
$12 a quarter.
Dunkin' Donuts increased the cost of their coffee 13 cents. We probably would notice it, and we'd probably just go ahead and pay it and not complain about it. So it's real, but it's an important commodity that we feel strongly is worth what the cost of producing it is.
So do we want to do water and sewer vote separate?
That would, from my standpoint, probably be the most straightforward thing to do.
Water, then sewer,
Sure.
then the rest of it. So, need a motion on
I
water.
would make a motion that we increase the water rate from $2.65 per 100 cubic feet to $2.95 per 100 cubic feet.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Make a motion that we increase the sewer rate from the current $2.55 per 100 cubic feet to $2.80 per 100 cubic feet.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great.
And I'll note that'll still keep us in the bottom third of our peers, so it's where we want to be.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
we're still a lot cheaper than a lot of them.
The next thing I did was I took a look at some of the fees that the department charges during the year, and I guess one point to be made on these fees is, for the most part, these fees don't impact, the day-to-day residential customer. So I think it's important from a cost standpoint. For instance, if a developer is going to benefit from a tie-in to the water main or the sewer main, to make certain that benefit isn't financed at the cost of the ratepayer, because we do need to balance, the interests of people that want to work and develop in town, along with the people that have to pay the rates in town. So one of the items that I've looked at is for almost 20 years now. Back, and I confirmed it back when Silvio Baruzzi was the DPW superintendent, the connection fee went up from, I believe it was about $450 per connection to $1,000 per connection.
Correct.
And it's stayed flat since that time. It's been a long time. And as I look at the benefit, anyone that ties into your water sewer, our water or sewer system, it benefits from the investments that people that have come before them have made in those systems. They continue to help defray the cost of operating the system and maintaining the system going forward, and it's good to have as many customers as we can, because that helps to spread those costs around. But there is definitely a benefit that anyone that ties into the system realizes, and that benefit, again, has really been paid for by those that have come before them. So at this point, I'm looking to recommend that we increase that connection fee to $1,500 per connection. with, the idea that maybe somewhere down the road, we look to increase that further, because again, I think the benefit is still far greater, is greater than what we charge for it. And by helping to come up with a fair and appropriate fee, we help to potentially reduce some of the burdens on the ratepayers. So my recommendation at this point, and I'll talk about water and sewer at the same time, where there's similarities, that both water and sewer, that we increase the fee to $1,500 per connection. Also looking at, if there's a connection request that's not a single-family home, take a look at how do you deal with that. And at this point, what most communities do is they work on an equivalent basis. If you have somebody that's looking to tie in and they generate twice as much flow or 3 times more flow, you typically look at a ratio of that fee to the discharger. If somebody, for instance, and you wanted to come in, and I know there have been some discussions in the past of maybe connections to adjoining communities. How do you value what the town of East Long Meadow would make available to that developer in Hamden or somewhere else? And if they're going to tie 10 homes in, you would hope them to pay at least equal to 10 times what it would cost a single-family home to tie in. Not just 1 times, because it's only 1 connection point, but in my mind should be multiples of that.
And that's coming down the pike.
I have heard some, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the recommendation there, that we increase the fee to $1,500 when we look at, but that said, everything gets looked at on a case-by-case basis, because you can't necessarily, everything's different. A gas station that ties in, for instance, typically doesn't generate very much flow, so a connection fee here is a minimum amount. If a very heavy water-based industry comes to town, and the town sees some benefits as a result of that, we have the flexibility to kind of talk about that. But this is kind of the concept going forward. If you're similar to 2 houses, you pay what 2 houses would pay.
Right.
Other pieces of the fee, that's certainly the most significant item.
No, right now we're dealing with water, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
The other connection fee that we do charge in water is also for a fire service. Again, a connection made to, typically many large industries or commercial developments, in addition to having a domestic connection,
They have
would run a fire,
dedicated fire line. Yeah.
dedicated fire line. So we'd be looking at a $1,500 charge per connection there. Some communities charge based on pipe size. Some charge more for an 8-inch connection versus a 6 versus a 4.
Correct.
Keeping it fairly simple. Because typically fire service connections are, 2 inches or 4 inches is the minimum, going all the way up to 8 inches in some cases, maybe even more.
All right.
Some of the other items, some of the minor items, we have an inspection fee that we currently charge. It's $45. Now I'm recommending we increase that to $50. Again, it's really the same thing. Those numbers have been flat for a long time. I think that really covers it on the water side. It's really the connection fees as well as the inspection fee per dwelling and the fire service. On the sanitary sewer service fee schedule, same approach on the sewer connections as I talked about. Again, there's an inspection fee that applies. There is one item on here that we do charge, which is a minimum charge for sewer block. As the board knows, if somebody calls up and they have a sewer backup, we'll typically go out and we'll confirm whether or not the problem is ours, if it's in our line, or if it's in the residence line. While we're out there, if it's in the residence line, we will assist them because we're already there, we're already mobilized.
Right.
Even if it's not directly our problem, but we do have a minimum fee that we charge to the resident. That minimum fee right now is $75, and my recommendation that we increase that to $100. It's still probably a third of what an outside contractor would charge.
Exactly. They're still getting a great benefit there.
But again, we're already on site at that point. We've already responded, so there's some rationale for that not necessarily being as expensive as calling an outside contractor who has to mobilize a crew of people to get out there and respond to an issue.
All of these, I don't see any. How do you deal with a grease trap? I mean, I believe all our grease traps are inside the dwellings here.
Grease traps, is an area that we need to continue to discuss amongst boards.
Right.
From a regulatory standpoint, grease traps fall under the jurisdiction of the Board of Health and not the Board of Public Works.
Right.
Obviously, they impact us, or the lack of a grease trap, significant. So, yes, we would like to get a dialogue going where we help to educate the Board of Health, what the impact of not having grease traps can have on our sewer systems, and the labor and the time and the sewer backups and all the other problems that can be caused. Particularly if you're a restaurant or another facility that generates large volumes of grease and don't remove that before it's dumped into our system.
And we've
Right,
had
so-
our problems with that.
They definitely,
We've got a lot of problems with that, and I think currently, right now, the way it sits, is they have a undersized grease trap that's inside the building, and there's no provision for exterior grease trap. And now, I mean, couldn't we mandate that outside the building permit footprint, there's an exterior grease trap if you're a restaurant?
I would have to go back and read state statutes as well as the town
Right.
charter to see how that responsibility is drawn. I believe most communities deal with it under the Board of Health. I don't know the exact words in the state statutes, if that's, black and white, that it absolutely has to be the responsibility of Board of Health, or if there's any ability for the Board of Public Works
Because I know
to
many
take
other,
responsibility for that if we choose.
right, because I know many other communities require an exterior, 1,000 or 1,250
Right.
grease trap outside. We don't. We can get away with a little grease trap that's in there that doesn't get cleaned or, as regularly as it should, and then we're stuck with all these grease backups. So, I mean, I don't see any kind of a fee structure.
Yeah, I think we have to sort through the responsibility and what we can and what we can't
Impose.
take on responsibility for if we choose to.
Right.
If we can,
But we're ultimately stuck with the.
we're the
grease.
beneficiaries of it. Yes, one way or the
We're
other, we get it.
On the receiving end.
Yeah. So I will research that further and get back to the
Okay.
board. Because I do agree it's a problem. And we have repeat offenders, without mentioning
And
names.
they don't care.
in certain
because there's-
locations, and we know every year we're gonna have a problem.
Nothing happens to them, so there's no recourse.
What about the minimum charge for water and sewer that we charge? Where would we, I don't see that stated anywhere. I see under sewer, availability charge per
Right.
year, but should we have
That's a
that
good
in there?
point, that it should be on this document, so that when we put this document out there, everybody's aware of that. What I would do is put it in the notes underneath the table on both. And as the other board members likely know, we assess a minimum charge of 10 cubic feet per quarter. And it's our approach to what many communities do as a base charge or a meter charge. Same type of thing. It guarantees, there's some cost for us just to make water available, to make sewage available.
Right.
So it ensures that everybody pays something. The people that use a more significant volume pay more, but everybody pays at least that minimum. So if the
So you
board,
put that at the bottom of each,
I would put it there, yes.
in the footnotes?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's a good point. I did see it on one of the old documents a number of years ago, and it seems to have not got carried through, so it's, yeah. It will make things a lot easier for folks to explain when they call and they ask, why are we getting this bill? We can refer to,
It's on both. Is it on both?
it would be on both, correct?
Two other, just quick ones. Illegal hookup to water. Note 4 says charge per month from inception of building permit. What does that mean?
It, not having been involved when this was developed, because it's been there, I believe, a number of years, as I would interpret is if someone built a home and connected to the water system or connected to the sewer system, because there's similar language there, and didn't get our approval, we would have the right to charge them that penalty, essentially.
But per quarter?
No, it's per month, but
Oh.
I'm trying to figure out, if
What
they
is-
don't get a building permit, then we can never charge them.
That's a good point, yeah.
And is it from the inception of the building permit back, because they hooked up before they got the building permit, or?
Yeah,
I think the language there, proposed language needs to be charged per month from finding of illegal connection, or it's not even finding, it would be if you knew they hooked up.
from use of.
Yeah, from use of illegal hookup until metered service installed.
Or from the time it became, I mean, you could argue, you could say, I only hooked it up last month. Well, you know the guy hooked it up 5 years ago.
Right.
You know, or it was available 10 years ago, so we're
Right.
gonna bill you from.
So it's from the
10 years.
illegal use
Yep.
until the metered use.
Agreed use?
Just kind of clean.
Agreed illegal
Need-
use?
No, metered use.
No.
Because it'll just keep going. If they don't get a meter and get onto our
No,
system, we're gonna charge
he's
them.
gonna say, I only been doing it for a month. When you know he's been doing it for 5 years.
Well, that's our burden to figure that
Yeah.
out.
Right.
All right.
But at least it'll get them going to get it metered.
Right.
Whether it's looking at the town census.
So
to
that
see
was
how
just
long
one
someone's
there
lived
that I-
there, or-
One
Okay,
there that
town
I
census,
saw.
okay.
And then the other one is on the last block of the sewer one. It says if the sewer is stubbed out the property line, the builder need to pay $1,500 and the amount of the sales and service to install the meter. That's only
Good
on
point,
water,
that carried
right?
over, yes,
So we gotta get rid of install the meter?
yes. It would be the amount of sales and service, if any.
Right.
In that case, sales and service would only be if we're installing the service, we're billed for it. If not, then,
Right, the drain layer does that, right?
yeah.
I think that's all I saw. I'll go for both of them.
All right, I make a motion that we approve the proposed, or presented water sewer 2015, 2016 with the two changes that we talked about, the illegal hookup and the minimum charge.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye. Okay.
And I make a motion that we approve as presented sanitary service 2015, 2016 with the same changes for the illegal hookup and the minimum charge.
Second.
Any further discussion?
Yep.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
The next sheet is titled Other Services, and it's a little bit of a catch-all for a number of things. The most significant change that I'm recommending here is on the storm drain connection, or storm drain entrance fee. You know, for a long time, I think people have thought, haven't really given consideration to the value of having a storm drain available to a property in order to tie your sump pump in, in order to tie your roof leaders in order to tie your foundation drains in. And also, as we look forward, we recognize that the town is going to be forced to focus on storm drainage issues much more in the future as the EPA adopts in the next probably a year and a half to 2 years now, the new Phase 2 stormwater regulations that will require the town to more completely map its storm drainage system, look for any sort of illicit connections that might exist in terms of, things being connected to the storm sewer that shouldn't be connected, will require the town to sample the outfalls in its storm drainage system and a number of different things. So I think the importance and the value of having storm drains are rising. So at this point, what I'm recommending is, the way the wording used to be written was, if we connected whatever you gave us to the storm sewer, we'd charge you $200, regardless of what it cost, and we'd charge you $200. There was no connection fee as such. That was strictly to reimburse us for labor. There was no fee if you connected and you did the work yourself. What I'm recommending at this point is that we charge like we do in water and sewer, although the value of that connection isn't as great as water and sewer, so I'm not recommending we charge the same, but to charge a fee to connect to the storm drain, to connect to the catch basin, anticipating again that we're going to have to start investing more money in our storm drainage system going forward, and recommending that fee be increased from $200 only if we did the work to a $500 connection fee. And then if we do the work like anything else, you know, the person that requests us to do the work pays our sales and service costs to do the work.
As I recall, and John, you probably will remember, I think the reason we kept it low, or I think we lowered it, was to create an incentive for them to hook up. I mean,
Yeah.
we didn't want to penalize them, we wanted,
Right.
this is one that they were discharging illegally, and here it was, just made it more reasonable for them to do it the right way.
Right.
And I think that's the only reason we did that, so.
And as I think about that, it is a very good point, because it, you know, every community has challenges of trying to get people not to put things into the sanitary sewer that they're not supposed to, storm drainage, foundation drains, et cetera. So the idea of making it available does help to, I
Entice
wouldn't say
them to do the right
I wouldn't
thing?
say quite incentivize them, but it makes it less difficult for them to do
Costly
so.
for them, yeah,
Yeah,
right.
yeah. So I could see that definitely, and if the board felt that that benefit outweighed,
$300.
right, it could be a good way to stay.
I can see where you guys were, but looking at where we're going with these new stormwater regs, I think we almost, at some point, we're gonna be, you know, there's gonna be a column here, stormwater, and that's not gonna be that far off. Where, you know, you got sewer, water, stormwater, you know what I mean? And I think we'd be better off on the curve. I mean, certainly if we're looking at a $1,500 sewer versus a $500 storm drain entrance fee, I mean, I think you're right by implementing this at this point.
I guess the question would be is, what's our ability to go in and inspect for that? I know it's been a while, we haven't talked about it in a bunch of years, but is there an ability to actually, under the INI or the stormwater regs, that we're able to inspect for illegal
hookups?
connections, or?
I think we were smoking them, weren't we?
Smoking will look, you'll detect roof leaders primarily, or dry traps.
Yeah.
But some pumps, things like that, you won't detect. You'll detect catch basins, or catch basins tied into a sanitary sewer. Short answer is, can you force entry for the purpose of inspecting for sump pumps? No. You can, the Board of Health can. Health agents do have rights under public health purposes to access any property. Water and sewer entities don't. Typically what's done is it's a voluntary process where you attempt many times 2 or 3 times, and you know, you get a pretty good participation rate. You might get into half the homes, 3/4 of the homes. You won't get into necessarily every home. But that generally tells you if there was a subdivision built about the same time, the construction was all the same type, they all had foundation drains because, you know, they're all dealing with poor soils and high groundwater. You know, then at that point, you're pretty certain that everybody in that street, you know, has a foundation drain, and that foundation drain is likely tied in. Just as I'm thinking right now, maybe one alternative here might be, and I think it would be appropriate, apply a fee for new connections, new development, and perhaps have a reduced fee for relocations. You know, so if you have somebody coming in that has an existing connection to something else,
Right.
and they come to you and say, we want to make it right, we want to connect to the storm
Right.
drain, have a reduced fee or
Right.
partially waived fee.
Or if we, if a new subdivision comes in, like I know, like Millbrook Circle, the guy that developed that, he made sure that every lot had a storm drain connection for the footing drains.
Right.
And, you know, that was 20, 25 years ago.
Right.
Where very few, I've seen a developer take the time to make sure that every single lot had a footing drain.
Right.
So, I mean, at that point, if we somehow entice the developer at that point to introduce that, I mean,
I see the point. I've done it on a number of projects where you're doing a complete street reconstruction, or you're relaying water and sewer,
Yeah,
et cetera. At that point, if you're putting in a new storm drain, whether you're the developer or the municipality doing
Right.
it, you want to put in storm drain laterals. You want
Right.
to put a connection right up to the property line to
Right.
make it easier for the property owner to tie in and do the right thing. It's
Right.
easy at that point. It's difficult and more expensive to do it later.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt.
So does every subdivision have a storm drain system fronting the houses?
Not necessarily.
Not
because
necessarily, yeah.
You could have a peak in the road, so you're picking up storm drain over here and storm drain over here. Just because there's a peak in the road, that doesn't mean that guy has got any less groundwater. He just doesn't have any availability to a storm drain right in front of him.
Only so I'm not
Sure.
confused. So sewer, we stub it to the property line and a drain layer takes it all the way into the house. The plumber takes it from there.
Right.
Right.
Water, we stub it to the water box, the curb stop,
Yep.
Yep.
the valve. Do we take it to the house? Or a
No, the
contractor?
drain layer would.
So a drain layer takes it to the house, and then we go on the inside, put a meter in,
Correct.
Right.
and then the plumber takes it from there.
Right.
So on a storm drain connection,
It would be similar to a sewer connection.
theoretically, in a new development, there'd be theoretically the access, but not the same as the water and sewer, because there's always a water and sewer available
Right.
to any new home,
Right.
right? And then in an existing neighborhood where there's no storm drains, we can't even really offer this for 500 or 200.
Correct. It may
Like
not.
if I
be a
call
case-
up,
it'd
if
be
I
a
call
case
up
by
and,
case.
well, if I call up and I'm in a neighborhood with no storm drain, it's 2 miles away, I say, okay, I want that thing for 500 bucks.
Can't give it to you. Can't, yep.
So I guess I'm just wondering what the wording has to. I mean, water and sewer is cut and dry. We got it out front. It's sometimes we win, sometimes we lose. It's further, shorter, whatever.
Right.
But on this one, we got to think about,
How far they're gonna chase it.
yeah.
Or it can
Well,
just
that's
be if
just,
available.
So it's got to be if available.
Yep.
Entrance fee.
Right.
Entrance fee if available,
Right.
if applicable.
So right in front of a house, let's say there's a catch
Catch
basin.
basin, right,
And we say they can go into that.
right.
500 bucks or 200 bucks is what we're talking about. They can go into, they can call a drain layer and go all the way from their drains, their sump pump, or whatever, right to that. And all we're gonna do is go make sure they did it right? Or are we gonna actually go into the catch basin and keep the integrity of the catch basin and put a pipe out and up for them to get to?
I don't think so. I think that's the $500 entrance fee.
I suspect, and John certainly jump in, I suspect we've been less, storm drains are sort of the, the least valued utility that's out there. So I suspect we've been less rigorous in terms of making certain that we tie in versus developers tying in.
I don't ever remember tying into a property, going to the property line like we do sanitary sewer or water. We always bring it right to their property line, stub it, and keep going. Never with storm.
But an existing one, let's say it's an existing, there's no stub there.
No, there's not.
And so they come with a black pipe, a 2-inch black pipe or a 3-inch black pipe or whatever they want, and they pump it over. And then we don't want them on top of the road, right? Because we don't
Right,
want
right, you
ice
don't
in the
want-
winter. So they gotta dig down and poke a hole in the side of that's okay, a drain layer
I
that
think-
we recognize with a license?
A
Good to go?
licensed drain layer. I
Good to
mean,
go.
the way
I'm just-
I've done.
I'm learning, yeah.
The way I've done them is, and I think I did one right on the corner of Maple Shade and what's the first street on the right there? And we just simply.
Hillside? No.
No,
Maples, off North
Maple
Elm.
Shade and,
I mean, North
not Day, but the one down closer to the intersection. We just took a slab of concrete
Right.
out, we drilled in there, and, before I put the slab back in, I think I had Frank come down, take a look at,
Sure.
we put some hydraulic cement in and just drilled an
Covered
inch
it.
and a half line in there, and we blew it into the back of the catch basin, put the slab back in place. So, I mean, something like that, so you'd have an inspection fee. But there should be a $500 entrance fee on top of the inspection fee.
I'm inclined to kinda hang on the $200 number. And the only reason I say that is I want more people to do it.
I'm,
I want more people to do
Yep.
it. I'd almost say free, but free's not a good word because there's no commitment.
Yep.
And we have to go out and inspect or at least coach or at
well,
least.
is the $200 gonna be the entrance and the inspection? Or is it gonna be a $200 entrance fee and then a $50 inspection fee?
We had been 200 and then a $45 inspection fee.
I would say 200 and then 50.
Yep.
So, right, so we
Keep
got
that process is separate.
a
and-
$200 entrance fee and then the $50 inspection fee. That makes
And
sense.
in a new subdivision, the the developer actually put the stub in per our requirements, right?
Right.
When they, or do we put it in?
No, he would have
On
to
a
do the whole
storm
thing.
drain?
Yeah.
We actually don't currently, planning doesn't currently require, and
we
it's
should.
partly, you know, we can push
So we
planning
should
to require.
probably, so we probably should
Yeah.
introduce that to them.
So I wrote down, like,
Right.
you know, planning board, we should make sure that that's part of any subdivision that has.
Just stub out wherever the storm
Every house.
drains are gonna go by, stub it out.
It's real easy when they're cutting the road in there.
Right.
I mean, I don't wanna say it's real easy, but it's
It's the
probably
easiest time.
The easiest thing that you're probably gonna have to do in that subdivision is either tee into the back, tee into or Y into a line, or come into the back of a catch basin, run up the tree belt and then pick up 2 more lots.
Right.
You know, that may not be right in front of a section of storm drain.
Is it mandatory that in new subdivisions that they, if they have, the connection, or need to make the connection, that they have to do it?
Well, it's mandatory in the building code that you have some provision for a footing drain.
If you have a
That's
footing,
mandatory in the building code.
if you have a footing drain, you have to tie into a, you have to have a pump?
No, because you could go gravity.
Right,
So it's mandatory that the dwelling is built with some type of a footing drain.
right.
So why don't we make it mandatory that, you know, if you're gonna put the road in, you got some provision to send the water out, and if you gotta pump it. Because there's, you know, I would say there's less than 50% of them are gonna go gravity. So I would say the majority of them are gonna have to be pumped. You know, we know we have poor soil conditions. We're not like we're in a community that has good soil and low water
Right.
tables.
If-
So, I mean,
If somebody was to have to put a sump pump in and they have the, what you would call it, the
Footing.
Footing drain.
footing drain, can they tie into that footing drain if it's?
you know,
if
like
it's-
I did a bunch of houses in Millbrook Circle with Amy Dutel, who was the developer, and he shot elevations on most of the lots that would, and I think most of them went gravity, because he had the forethought. I mean, that particular subdivision had some rolling terrain and allowed for it, and like, every cellar hole that I did for him, I mean, before we dug the cellar hole, we dug up the sewer lateral and the footing drain lateral, took elevations, and set the house accordingly. I mean, there's just a little bit of forethought. And, you know, I would say, I mean, I probably did 10 of those house sites with him, and we were able to get, I think, those 10 that we did, because when he was cutting the road in, he had the forethought that, you know, I wanna build a nice house, I'm gonna make sure that the water's got someplace to go. You know?
Within the building code, which governs 10 feet outside the building, I'm not certain, I just don't know, but once you get beyond that, it's fair game. You know,
Right,
you could tie a sump pump, you could tie a
Roof
floor
leaders.
drain, you could tie a roof leader in.
Right.
The only thing I do want to mention about sump pumps, and if we put the word sump pump on here, we need to make certain that we're referring to uncontaminated discharges, because
that's
that's
the-
one of the big issues coming out under the new stormwater regulations.
That's the other thing
is
that I was gonna bring up.
They don't want to say you can discharge sump pumps to storm sewers, because you can if you're discharging clean water. But
Right.
if you've got a oil tank in your basement and it leaked, and you don't want to say it's okay to tie that in, because it's not. But if you have uncontaminated drainage, yes, it is.
Right, which, you know, like Long Meadow doesn't want anything directly discharging into a catch basin. Agawam is the same. I just did, you know, some pretty extensive drainage in Agawam, and they wanted us to have, in a condo unit, outside sumps.
NDC trap.
No, just outside sumps, so, you know, and this, it was a run of 8 units, and we took 30-inch and 12,
Full title.
went down, 9 feet, went under the footings. Buildings were set on stone, we got each unit to drain into three of these somehow. Multiple pumps, multiple battery backup pumps. But, the Agawam DPW was, If the pump's inside the building, it's no. If you guys wanna put the pumps on the outside of the building, where we know that they're not gonna be, pick up anything, you know, which I really don't see. I mean, the average person isn't gonna, go down in their basement, open up their sump pump lid and get rid of all their old paint or any of that stuff. I mean, it doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, and the chance that your oil tank lets go is kind of far and few between, you know what I mean?
It does happen, and if it
I mean,
happens, then
does-
it becomes partly our problem if it's
Right.
connected to our
Right.
system.
It's also gonna be the homeowner's problem, because we'll be able to
Right.
trace that right
Correct.
back to
Yep.
them.
Right, right, and then at that point, they're, you know, homeowners insurance typically picks up that remediation, you know? At least on all those sites that I've worked on, you know?
So I would agree with all these, but I think I might want to keep that at 200.
Sure. And we'll note the word "if available," so that it's
If
clear that
available.
we're not committing to providing something that may not be available.
And then I would also think about another reminder and press release and, you know, just reminding people that they can contact us for the feasibility of.
Mm.
Yeah, we lost our inside meter reader that used to be able to go in and,
Mm.
you know, to read the meter, because
Right.
usually it's always somewhere in that same vicinity.
Right, right, you usually got the sewer clean out there, and you got the water meter in there, usually the sump pump's going right in there.
Piece of plywood over a square hole, kind of a dead gift.
Well, but you see the pump
Into the
pumping
set
right in there,
tub.
but I mean, at
Yeah.
the same point, I think we wanna open up some dialogue with the planning board
Yep.
for future subdivisions.
One of the selling points at times has been that if you have a sump pump connected to their sewer system and there's a problem with the sewer system, potentially it's coming back into your house.
Oh, it's
So
coming right
it's-
in, baby.
So, you know, the advantage of being separate is you're now,
Yeah,
You're not
don't they
taking
usually have
eliminating that
Don't they
problem.
usually have backflows on the sumps in most cases?
right at the pump sometimes, but if
I
it's.
mean, if I put them in, I like to eliminate those. I mean, I find the backflow in a sump pump seem to be more problems than they're worth, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But when I've seen them, I've always seen a backflow and built in with it.
Yeah.
That would stop that from happening. All right. Make a motion to approve the other services, 2015, 2016 rates that were presented with the changes to storm drain entrance fee per building, to say if available, reduce the connection fee to $200 and an inspection fee of $50.
Second.
Any further discussion?
Good, good, good.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So the next item, and the last item I have, is the transfer station fees. The first sheet you see, which is sheet number 13, presents fiscal 14. Since we're not through fiscal 15, I couldn't present, you know, year-end fiscal 15 information, but, you know, this really shows in fiscal 14, and it has continued to some extent in fiscal 15 where our challenges are, which is if you take a look at the left-hand side of the sheet, our expenses to operate the transfer station in fiscal 14 and our revenue, there was about a $10,000 difference between expenses and revenue. That's at the moment forgetting about labor associated with operating the transfer. We're strictly trying to trying to pay our expenses. So there's really, there are two issues here, and we're working on both of them. One is that our budget is obviously, you know, significantly lower than it needs to be. You know, our budget in fiscal 14, which is the same in fiscal 15, was $42,500. Our expenses reached $68,000 and change. Even if our revenue met those expenses, we need our budget to be increased, and we've asked for an increase this year, not necessarily high enough in 1 year to get to where we need to be, but a significant step with the goal of getting to the point where our budget is appropriate and our revenue and our expenses match as well. In fiscal 15, we've done a couple of things. As you recall, we increased the sticker fee cost to $45 from $40, which is where it had been for 10, 12 years. That change by itself, we believe, will increase revenue by about $6,000 in fiscal 15. if you take a look at the number of stickers that were issued in the prior year. We also have worked to negotiate a metal revenue agreement where we're now through the balance, about the last third of the year, expecting to bring in about $4,000 in revenue, which again will help to balance that side of the equation as well. We're not done. We haven't solved all this problem in 1 year. So moving forward in fiscal 16, we're going to be, or fiscal 16, we'll be able to benefit from the metals revenue for the entire year, and we expect that that'll bring in about $10,000 of revenue. And I am recommending that we do look at another increase in the sticker fee cost to try to continue to balance the revenue and expenses at the transfer station. And then we continue to work, and it's challenging because there aren't that many people out there these days that haul bulky waste material, which is what Waste Management is doing for us, hauling and disposing of the bulky waste and the wood waste, but not giving up and putting a little thought into other alternatives. Again, maybe we haul ourselves, for instance, would acquiring a vehicle that would allow us, a used vehicle that might allow us to pull a roll-off out ourselves. We still would have to pay a disposal fee, and that disposal fee probably isn't going to be a lot less than what Waste Management charges us in total, but we have to look at alternatives to bring our costs down as well.
So are you looking to,
How many times are we tipping that for 29,000?
January to December.
right, increase the sticker fee effective immediately to $45, and then July 1 for fiscal 16, raise it again to $50?
Yeah, fiscal 15 we've done already.
It's already
That's
45.
currently in effect,
Till December.
or till July 1st.
Yeah, fiscal year.
Yeah.
But he's using he's using fiscal 14 for the purpose of the report, but we're in 15 now.
Correct. So when last year, July 1st, we increased the rates from $40 to $45.
Oh, okay, we already did.
Yes.
All right, okay, that's where I was.
But they're
Okay.
good January to December.
So for
Yes.
2016, you're looking for an increase to $50 per sticker?
Right.
Okay. I make a
But
motion.
if anybody who has one or gets one
They're good for the year.
before July 1st, they're gonna be good till December.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
All right, are we ready for a vote?
Well, then
Yeah.
there's the rest of these.
Okay. Oh, all right. All right, you want to go over the rest of these?
Sure. Two other sheets here. The second sheet is our rules and regulations that call out some of the cost items, and the third sheet is the electronics disposal cost. And those have generally been, what we collect for revenue pretty well matches what the disposal cost is, so I'm not recommending any changes on the electronics disposal. Again, on the rules and regulations, the only changes I'm looking for, recommending, is increasing the sticker cost effective July 1st to $50 per year. Looking to increase a couple of the other items to a small extent. The pickup load fee for bulk items is currently $25 per pickup size. Yeah, it's about 2/3 of the way down the sheet.
Yeah.
And would be looking to increase that to $30 per pickup load. One of the big things we clarified, and the board clarified this last year, was we had issues with mattresses, and do we count one mattress, do we count multiple? And we updated the regulations partway during the year last year, where we made it clear that the mattress fee applies per mattress. So that's been helpful as well.
Has somebody thought that two were better than one?
$10, bring them in, as many as you can fit. And then the other one was in the landscaper charges, again, another modest increase. Currently, we charge, and we don't collect a lot of revenue here, but we charge $25 per pickup load, and would be recommending we increase that to $30, and then for dump truck, increasing it from $35 to $40.
But we're only taking grass and leaves from them.
Yep.
Yep.
The bulk of what we get in there is our residents. It's
Right.
on a Saturday in
Yep.
May.
Yep.
People will be bumper to bumper getting in, and the same
yeah.
thing in the fall.
Yep.
one of the things just to keep in the back of your mind relative to the transfer station is 2 years from now, things will look different. 2 years from now, the 2 phases of the landfill closure will be complete. We will have used probably the majority of the excess material that's on site, including the compost material on site. And at that point, I think that's when we really look at the long-term financial, what I would call it, framework of the transfer station, because we may have other revenue opportunities there at that point, but at this point, we need what we have. And we'll keep that as a means of reducing the cost of closing the landfill.
Make a motion that we approve the proposed transfer station fee schedule.
Second?
You want to talk about the changes, or you've already talked about the changes
think
in
we
rates?
just-
Oh, as presented.
Okay.
Second.
Any further discussion?
I think we're good.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, I'll try to move through the rest of my items fairly quickly.
Do we want to close, is it a hearing? Do we want to close it?
Good point, it would be a good
Yeah.
idea to,
So you're going to close
Make a
the-
motion that we close the rate setting here.
Second.
Any further discussions?
Nope.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, at this point, then we're gonna turn you over to the superintendent's report.
first item is my monthly budget update, and it's really very similar to previous months. We are trending very well in all divisions with the exception of the snow and ice, which, well, that snow and ice, we'll talk about that in a moment, and the waste division. Waste division, I'll note, as we've talked about before, that we have talked to appropriations, and we are going to be able to use our metals revenue to essentially increase our available budget. So we're going to be able to help to close some of that gap by bringing in revenue this year. We'll get it through, but it's going to be tight.
Right.
Highway's in good shape. Building maintenance is in better shape than last year. As you know, we had a significant unexpected expense at Birchland Park early this year that caused us to bump up, proportionally higher than we would have been based on the calendar at that time, but we're recovering pretty well. We're coming back into budget. Snow and ice, last month I noted that we were looking very good compared to previous years, but we were expecting to see a number of salt and fuel bills, and those are coming in now, and as a result of that, and we are now higher than last year, and that will go a bit higher, unfortunately. We do have some other salt bills that are encumbered right now, but haven't yet made it into the budget. It was a long year, and given the fact that, talking about salt, that the salt prices increased 40% for the volume. I haven't gone through and added up the tonnage that we have purchased this year versus last year, but I expect it's probably comparable. I will note that the salt shed is full at this point, so we're going to go into next year, with not having to purchase a significant amount of salt, at least maybe for the whole winter, if we get lucky.
Maybe we should let it go down because of the price. Maybe the price will go down next year.
Yeah, well, at this point, it's here, so it's,
We're not gonna use it until
yeah, we could try to resell it, but I'm not certain we'd get any many buyers right now. so.
Thanksgiving. Hopefully.
The one that really, I have to say, somewhat amazes me, I'm very happy to see, is the energy budget.
Yeah.
Given this year, we continue to trend very well, and I expect, that the heating season is going to go longer than normal this year. Will that be offset enough by the lack of air conditioning? I'm not sure, so that things balance out, but we've had some tough months behind us, and I was expecting these bills to get bigger than last year, and they still haven't.
It's awesome.
And again, the other divisions are trending very well in pretty much every case, at or below last year and below budget. Couple of other updates. Town meeting, as you know, is May 18th. At this point, there are likely going to be 3 articles that the Board of Public Works will be responsible for. That'll be the Chapter 90 article. And Dan Murphy will be talking in a couple of minutes about what will be in the Chapter 90 article this year, but now that the winter recovering assistance program monies have been provided, that will have to be rolled into the town meeting article as well. The two enterprise fund articles, again, as we talked about, expect will likely be sponsored by the Board of Public Works. There is a taping with LCAT and moderator Jim Shields on April 30th at 6 p.m.
What day, April what?
April 30th,
At what time?
6 p.m. And we have some time between now and then to figure out who will be handling that, but would expect one board member to be available for that. Two other items, a request that the union had made during our negotiation process that we felt comfortable moving forward with as a sign of good faith with the union is to make 7 to 3:30 p.m. our standard work hours. We have done that. We've done it, and my memo to the union says we're doing it on a trial basis, so that if there are any issues, and I don't expect there to be any issues, but if there were any issues, we'd have the ability to make adjustments. And we are going to start that April 20th, that first Monday of the 20th of April. And then my last item is the transfer station. We are going to open that on Wednesdays, starting April 22nd. And I lied, my last item. As the board, I believe, heard a couple of months ago, Mass DEP came in and did an inspection of our wastewater pumping stations. They wrote us a letter as a result of there being new regulations that bring our pumping stations into the same regulations that wastewater treatment plants were governed by previously. Those regulations require staffing or inspecting every pumping station 7 days per week. Given the very sophisticated SCADA system that we have, we believe that, and believe pretty strongly, that we did not need to physically visit every pumping station every day, that our time was much better spent doing maintenance as opposed to driving around town making certain things were still there. So we did write a letter to Mass DEP. We requested that schedule allow us to inspect our major pumping stations 5 days per week, which is Vineland, Watchog, and Denslow, and the remaining stations twice per week, and they did approve that schedule. And that's essentially what we had been doing before the new regulations took effect. So bottom line is we got approval to continue doing what we have been doing.
That's awesome.
That's great.
And now I will be quiet.
Turn it over to John.
As you guys hopefully have seen, the sweeper's been out, not as long as we would have liked, but on a regular basis now. And they've got a lot of work in front of them. We also have started milling some areas. The town has received $87,000 pothole money that we've gone out and milled, or milling as many bad areas as we can in order to use that money, and so that it's not coming out of our highway budget. And it's actually a great benefit right now. The guys have done large areas on Parker Street, Denslow and Benton, as well as what they're on Westwood now. So there are other areas that we're going to need to go back and address. We're doing the worst areas first, and we're going to go as quickly and as possible to get these areas, these larger areas done ourselves, prior to having to send a lot of our employees in different areas. So we actually have two crews working. We have one milling the road and a blacktop crew behind them, getting caught up on the several water breaks we had over the winter, and doing these areas. So they're doing a good job. They've gotten a lot done, but we still have quite a bit more work to do. Mr. Mayberry at our last meeting had suggested that we meet with Colin Drury, the athletic director of the rec department, and see how we could work with any volunteers that they might have. Colin, we did do that. Tommy Anderson and I had met with Colin, and he mentioned that there's probably one person that goes out on his own and is productive. We asked that when that's happening, if we're not directing him, that we're contacted in advance so we know where he is, so that's not being counterproductive. It's not on our schedule to go in afterwards with, and because it's going to be hit or miss with us. we're behind. Colin was nice enough, and I think he had foresight to see that they kicked their schedules back at least a week, maybe even closer to 2 as far as their starting times because of the winter that hung on so long, and then the condition of the fields. And that's bought us some time. So we are in good shape because of that. There's very little we could actually do. Tom's out there, he has painted fields, he's gotten things ready to the best of our ability with the people we have available to us. We are also, Roy's been flushing sewers again. We're working with Dan as far as doing inspections for upcoming paving projects and things like that. But you had talked earlier about the grease, the soap discharge, which builds up in the mains as well. We have gone out there and done pretty aggressively. Again, with the personnel we have, Roy's done it 2 or 3 days here and there. We'd have to take some people away and then go back at it, and he's done a good job. We've got some areas done. The problem areas we're working on, there's more to do, but we're in good shape right now. And,
Do you try to jet those creased areas a little bit more often?
As often as possible.
Yeah.
It would be nice to probably do them 4 times a year.
Right.
We're probably doing them absolutely 2 a year.
Right.
Every once in a while, when you get down to the north end of town, it'll pick up a smell because it will start holding the sewer back, and we'll get calls. So it might be 3 times a year. When that happens, we'll get out there.
Right.
4 times would be great. It's just difficult with the amount of work that we have to schedule for. You do it quarterly, but we are doing our best. And again, we're doing this as a scheduled type of maintenance. So it's going well, and we're getting a lot done, and we're getting caught up. We're getting to a place that we're gonna, I think, be comfortable. Again, milling these large areas and having the ability to put that blacktop down. Now, Andrix was the only plant that opened for early, I think they were open 2 weeks prior to Palmer opening, this last week. So we're not driving as far, and it's giving us the ability to get blacktop into these areas, and again, the guys are doing a really good job.
Yeah, it looks good. I mean, I see them all over town.
And I guess the best part is the cost isn't coming out of our highway
Right.
budget.
That's even better.
You know, so when we do start berming, doing our regular maintenance, it's just an enormous benefit for us.
I think the real benefit by doing this work ourselves, you've probably read about other communities that have big plans to move ahead with pothole projects, and they're talking about those projects that are going to start in a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks.
We'll be
We
done.
were doing this, the money was officially released, I think, on a Thursday. We were able to get all the paperwork signed and sealed, et cetera, probably on a Monday, and we had to go ahead on Tuesday of that week to go, and we were going that day. In fact, we were starting to mill in anticipation of then being able to get reimbursement for the pavement that we're gonna buy the next day to put in the areas that we milled, so.
Are we getting reimbursed just for the asphalt or for our labor?
Just for the asphalt. And Dan will talk a little bit about some of our other thoughts regarding utilizing the monies that are available, and what the criteria are.
Unfortunately, no labor.
Yeah.
But just to follow up on that, because we're in a place where we can't do work on fields, they're muddy, they're frozen, it's given us the ability to put good workforces out there that are being productive. Not that we wouldn't have other things we could do, but we're getting the most bang for our dollar now with our construction crews.
And we're focusing, if, people are concerned, focusing areas that we know we're not paving this year, maybe not paving next year, so we're looking to buy a couple of years with some of these patches till we're able to get to the streets and do a more long-term fix.
I attended a seminar this morning in Westfield, a company by the name of Time Bond was talking about some new technology that has been, they've come up with, or not they, but they were presenting it, about a new technology for potholes, and it really has to do with, research has found, is that the temperature is a big criteria. If the colder it is,
Yep.
the less it lasts. And so they've got some way of, I don't know if they're heating or, or what the new time now, but they mentioned that there is something new that we're bringing to Westfield DPW
Okay.
attention.
As you probably know, we did invest in a hot box a number of years ago, so we have the ability to buy mix and keep it warm.
Right, but I didn't know if it had something to do with, you know,
Talking about ground temperature?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I don't know if they're talking about putting one of those radiant
Infrared,
heater,
yeah,
infrared
yeah,
over
yeah.
there, just to heat it up and then putting it in, making it last almost permanently as opposed to a patch.
Mm.
If we use the hot box, the right temperature, and we don't burn the oil out of it, and there's a balancing act there.
Yeah.
Because you're moving right along, especially when things are difficult. But the real problem is when there's water in the hole.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't care how cold it is, if it's a dry hole and we put hot mix in there and tamp it properly, I've seen patches we've done years ago that are still in place.
Yeah.
But there's so much melt off from the existing snow, so much, rain, and because we're going out on an emergency basis and doing this when it's just snow, or just after we plow, so the roads are wet, there's moisture in the hole, that makes a
Can we,
big
can we
difference.
come up with a portable pump or something to suck it up and get it out, so the more you get out?
Dan, it isn't even necessarily that there's a puddle, it's just moisture in here. You think
If
that the
the-
blacktop would
Well, that's
just dry
probably
it
what
right
this-
out.
If
but
the
there's-
gravel's saturated
Yeah,
with
it's
water,
Yeah,
it's.
well, that's why I don't know,
Yeah.
but see if you can check
Is
with,
it Mark Sullivan or somebody else?
Rebecca, somebody was,
Ducharme?
yeah,
Okay,
she
yeah.
sort of mentioned it.
Sure, okay, I'll look into it.
And that's it.
Good. All right, I guess, yeah, I'll start with the wrap, a little bit more info on the Winter Recovery Assistance Program. As John and Bob both mentioned, it was $87,000. And I don't know if you heard, but they allowed more flexibility for the spending of the money this year. They're gonna allow us to buy some signs. So we've really got four things: the milling, as John mentioned, and patching. The second thing is line striping. We're looking to use some of the money to do line striping, which would normally come out of the maintenance, the regular budget. Third thing we're gonna look at is some crack sealing. And then fourth, the signs that I mentioned will be any roads that we have that we need to get signs replaced, we'll inventory those and do that work as part of this. The trick is we have to spend it by June 30th. So we're obviously looking for ways to make sure we take full use of that benefit.
One of the nice things this year too is that last year we had to pre-approve projects before we could actually move forward with anything, and they recognized that that was a tremendous slowdown. And all this is all about moving quickly and getting things done quickly, so they've specified what types of projects they'll fund, and they will fund them within the town accepted rights of way, but we don't have to go to Mass DOT and ask permission to replace this sign or to patch this road.
The striping, though, we've always put out for bid. Is that
Right.
something we're gonna do?
We would, yes, we would get, it likely stays below the threshold where we will be able to get quotes versus, it would be a bidding process, but a less formal bidding process, and we'd bring it back for recommendation.
Right. Okay, the second thing, I'll give you an update on the roads project. We're still working on that. We did a coring program, and we learned that we have thin pavement on Westwood and thicker pavement on Prospect. It's like 4 inches on Westwood. All right, let me see, let's see. I have a chart, but it was basically, that's the bottom line. It was pretty thin on Westwood and on Prospect, up to 10 inches of pavement. So it's really-
What's the gravel look like underneath it?
we did, we pulled gravel samples, and it was pretty consistent, fairly good in most places. The two locations that it wasn't very good, there's a section on Westwood, I guess I'd say east of Boyer,
Yeah,
and then on Porter at the low area. And there was definitely more fines in those samples that we took. So as we look at it, those are areas that we'll probably have to look at something more than just a traditional, overlay. Or
on Porter, that dip by the swamp there?
Yep,
Yeah.
yep, exactly, right in there. Those three, I think we did 3 down in there, and all 3 of them showed higher fines. We didn't test them, but you can.
Yeah,
look at
with a
that, you can
sieve
see right in
analysis,
there.
yeah.
You can see it right in there compared to all the other ones, so.
Most likely, we're leaning towards a select reclamation project, not the extent of Elm Street, but
Right.
for the several hundred feet that we need to. That's really the only way to improve the subbase material. If you
Right.
don't have a decent subbase, you're not getting the best return on the investment by putting good pavement on top of a poor subbase.
i.e. Converse Street?
Yeah.
No, they're milling it today, they milled it.
Okay.
They're spending their pot of more money on, and they just did that, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the only way you're gonna enhance the gravel
Right,
now.
right.
And the other thing, we may look at, throwing in, if there's a, catch basin very close by, we could do sub-drains like we were talking about before.
Yeah.
Something like that to help the water get out there. So pouring program, thickest pavement, we did the gravel samples. It's been great. We've actually gone through and we're looking at all the structures, popping all in with John, Roy, Chad, and Tom. They've been great. They've been working, pulling all the covers. We found 4 manholes that are completely sealed, so we're gonna look at those. We need to pull those up and see what the condition of the structure is underneath. So we wanna go through and make sure that we're not putting pavement over a structure that's gonna, be a problem in the future. So we're basically coming up with all those numbers and all the different structures and gates we want to replace to make sure we've got a complete project. Columbia Gas has indicated there are 2 locations where there are old cast iron gas mains. So like I just learned that Friday. One of them is on Prospect. It's basically the last couple hundred feet before you get to Center Square. That, as you go up the hill, that little stretch, there's I think it's an old 1900 cast iron main. And then the second location is at Westwood, where you come into North Main Street, just a couple hundred feet right there. So those are 2 locations they've identified they'd like to get in ahead of us before we do any work to get those mains replaced. So we'll build that. I'm waiting to get schedule from them so we can conservatively build it into the schedule so the contractor knows that that's part of the project.
The significance of that is by law, anytime a cast iron gas main gets exposed, they have to replace it. So they know that it will get exposed multiple times during the project, so they're better off just replacing that whole section before we repave.
Okay. We're working through just the scheduling. We're looking to put the ad in a week from Wednesday, and then we'll be opening bids probably during the beginning of May. Project cost somewhere, I would guess, 800,000 to $1 million. We're finalizing numbers once we get all the structure information back and finalize our limits. But again, so open in May, and hopefully we'll get some good bids and get some roads done this year.
And that spends, as we talked about before, between 2/3 and 3/4 of our fiscal 14 and fiscal 15 allocation. We're not even thinking about what's coming in 16, because although the legislature's already voted upon that. So it leaves us with some monies to do more crack sealing, do some of the secondary roads, make some improvement, because we're focusing in this first phase primarily on the main roads, but we won't stop with the main roads. We want to get those going first, and we'll back up and focus on some of the worst of the secondaries as well.
Right. And just the last thing I wanted to mention was the contract for the sewer main and manhole sealing is all set. We're just waiting for a firm date. The contract was effective on March 26th. We did want to leave a little flexibility because there's some wet areas where they're going to be doing some of the work. So we'll wait till it dry up, right? If we have a really, really wet spring, we obviously want to leave it flexible enough so they can come in when it's as dry as it can possibly be, maybe July.
Right.
Actually, you may want to mention the manhole in North Main, the one we plugged.
The manhole, oh yeah, that's right there, we put a plug, I guess it was a brook or an overflow from a stream connected. We got a plug and installed that, was it a week, maybe maybe a week and a half ago. So far, it seems to be good, although we did find, we plugged the pipe itself, and then they went in and looked, and there's actually water coming in underneath. So we're gonna have to look at additional remediation in that structure. We may want to concrete it up, build something around it.
This is
possibly
a sewer manhole? and
It's a
we're
sewer manhole.
Picking up water from the brook?
Yeah, drainage was coming in.
It's just north of the town hall in North Main, where there's an abandoned sewer line
Yeah.
that was not disconnected from the sewer system. So
Okay.
it's at the tail end, nobody's connected to it, and when Roy was TV inspecting North Main Street a little bit further to the north last year, he was seeing significant amounts of,
They
inches
plugged
of
it.
flow coming in the pipe, and we chased it upstream and found out that it was an area where this old pipe that's abandoned and crosses the brook. And
They tried to plug it. I mean, you can see in the video, they tried to plug it when they did the work, but it's just over time, a lot of water's just gotten around it. So we bought an inflatable plug and put it in.
Clay pipe?
Yes.
Yeah.
the plug was a temporary measure to make certain that we'd plug it and we didn't You know, there's stuff out there you don't know about sometimes.
Oh, yeah, plug it up now and then find out if somebody is still hooked on
You
to it.
abandon it permanently, and then you get a call. So this was to allow us to try it and be able to easily remove it if necessary, and
Makes
then
sense.
do the long-term
Yep.
disconnection.
So we'll keep an eye on that, and that's all I've got.
Sounds good. Any other business?
Couple of quick ones. Do we need to officially withdraw our town hall article?
I have sent an email to Nick.
Did we vote one in and we need to unvote it out?
I would say did administratively, if
Okay.
you want to reinforce that through a board vote, it could.
You guys know we're gonna pull our
I
town hall
don't, I think
warrant,
I'm good with it. I don't know
Article.
what the procedure is.
because they put the other stuff through.
Yep.
So, all right, we're good administrative. Fisher Avenue, they did do some patching, but it looks like it's still like deciding to cave in.
There's a little more work there, absolutely. Right where it drops down to Westwood, yes.
Well, yeah, I went up there
You end
yesterday.
up on top,
And
right.
Yeah,
the-
still.
Whatever was the drain there, I guess before, must have sucked up water with that water break or something.
It settled more. Yeah, the water break ran underneath the blacktop down to Westwood.
All right,
We had thought we had gotten it all. There was more settlement. We had the same thing happen on Maple Street, so we're gonna have to go back in there, John, and do a little bit more work.
all right.
We'll have to decide that it may make sense if we're, particularly in that piece of Westwood is probably one of the more difficult, or the more, not difficult, but the areas we're going to do perhaps reclaiming through that section of Westwood. Perhaps get Westwood in good shape and then chase it back up Fisher before
Yeah.
we're done, because we know we're
I'm
not done.
assuming it's a trench from either water or sewer pipe or something. It's like, it's a perfect swale, it's a
Yeah.
perfect place.
It is. But it's definitely from the water break we
Yeah,
had up
that's what
there.
I'm thinking, yeah.
It-
Chestnut Shaker, so I saw they're doing the thing in the middle.
Get it painted out. Where you're
They
gonna do
painted out
repair.
with probably a gas cap and a sewer cap and a
That's it.
sub cap.
That's mainly a guess.
But that storm drain there, or manhole cover, looked like it's sunk. And I thought we just did that one like last year or something. Is that just frost playing havoc with it?
Yeah, I believe it's just frost. We did work on both catch basins on the two corners of
I
Shaker
thought we
Road
did.
and
We just
Chestnut.
did them, right?
The catch basins, yes. No structures in the intersection. The hole in the intersection is a gas company gate. It's broke. We've called them several times. They came out and put a temporary fix in, as we did. We put some cold patch in there because it's not ours and we didn't want to get too involved with
Right.
it.
If you're on Shaker headed to the center, and you take a right onto Chestnut, right on that corner.
Yes, we worked on
There's
that
like a
last year.
manhole that's up or down, I think. I can't remember if it's a catch basin or a manhole, but
I know there was one or two that I called out in the fall, John. I know you
Anyway, I
wanted to
just-
go out there and,
I'm just curious if it's
Yeah.
just the frost is playing havoc
It
with us
can,
this
yeah.
year.
We did work on that,
That's
absolutely.
what I thought. All
some
right,
things move and they never go back to where they started. One thing I did mean to mention, now that you mentioned Chestnut and Shaker, it reminded me of Allen and Parker. The lights at Allen and Parker, we are likely going to have to replace the controller based on what we're hearing from Northrop. It's an old thumb screw type controller that they likely can't repair. We've reset it multiple times. It works good for 10 or 20 cycles and it has to be reset again. So right now, it's been set to flash red 4 ways. And as we look into whether or not we can repair versus replace the controller. We spoke with the police department today, and that was their preference, was to make it drop the stop signs and make it 4-way red flash.
Yeah, I'm a dangerous one to.
okay,
So, okay. Schedule our next meeting.
28th.
I cannot do Mondays anymore.
Buddy.
You go to Tuesdays unless
I
we go
can't do
to,
that Tuesday.
unless we go to 7 o'clock at night. Nobody wants to do that.
I can go to Wednesday the
I can
22nd.
do the Wednesday the 22nd.
We got 2:30 to 4:30, 5 o'clock, and they just shoot up here,
Yeah.
right?
I'm not gonna be here.
No, huh?
No, I'm gone that week.
The whole week?
Yeah, I'm going from like Monday to Monday.
So Tuesday, I can't do the 28th. I can do the 29th.
29th?
Wednesday the 29th.
That work for you, Dan?
Yep.
Okay.
Does that work for everybody else? Kelly, you good?
The 29th?
Wednesday the 29th?
Wednesday, okay.
Okay.
Okay,
Motion to adjourn.
Second,
any further discussion?
not about that.
How about that, right? We're out of here.
All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.